Hi, today we are going to read Chapter 6 of Front Desk by Kelly Yang. Chapter 6. Mrs. Clifton, from room 5, came running up to the front office at the crack of dawn in her pajamas. She banged on the window. "Open up! I need to speak to the manager." My parents and I jumped out of bed and buzzed her in. "What's wrong?" "I got a wake-up call for no reason at 6 a.m. and that's why." That darn phone system. It must have mixed up waking Mr. Stein in room 6 at 5 a.m. with Mrs. Clifton in room 5 at 6 a.m. At the thought of Mr. Stein, I froze. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:10. He was going to miss his very important meeting. I raced out the back door in my pajamas and across the motel, nearly crashing into Mr. Stein as his door swung open. Mr. Stein stepped out in his room in his robe, squinting at the morning sun. "What time is it?" he asked. I swallowed hard. We had to give both Mr. Stein and Mrs. Clifton refunds that day. As I handed back the dollar bills I had worked so hard to collect, my dad put his hand on my back while I fought the tears in my eyes. It brought me straight back to Mrs. Fletcher's class last year. Mrs. Fletcher was my 4th grade teacher at my last school, and every week, she gave us a spelling quiz. Whoever got all the words right got to hold this special notebook for the day. The cover was rubber, and it looked and smelled like a giant bar of chocolate. You could keep it for a whole day, too, which meant any time you wanted, you could sniff the delicious chocolatey scent. The notebook was filled with little messages and jokes that all the past winners had written down that the rest of us could not read. It was like belonging to a special club. Everyone wanted in on this club, and so did I. But then I started getting my quizzes back and seeing all my mistakes, and the chocolate notebook became as reachable as the moon. Excuse me. I stopped looking at it, stopped even thinking about it, until one day toward the end of the year, Mrs. Fletcher called my name. "The winner today is Mia," Mrs. Fletcher announced. The entire class spun around to look at me. They couldn't believe that some kid from China who was still learning English could win, and neither could I. There had to be some kind of mistake. But there was no mistaking it. Mrs. Fletcher was walking straight over to me with the notebook. She placed it in my trembling hands, and I held that notebook up to my nose, and I breathed in deep. As the rich chocolatey smell swirled up my nose, I wanted to cry. I was so happy. Then I looked up and saw Mrs. Fletcher's face. She was back at her desk, and she was looking over the spelling quizzes again. Something was wrong. "Wait a minute, hang on. There's a mistake here," she frowned. "Mia, I'm going to need the notebook back." I shook my head and clutched the notebook tight. "No, you can't do this. You can't take it away. You just gave it to me." But she did. She got up, walked over, and snatched it from my hand just as swiftly as she had placed it there. The velvety, chocolatey scent, along with the pride in my belly, disappeared. That's what giving Mr. Stein and Mrs. Clifton back their money felt like that day. As I watched the bill slip away, the money I had worked so hard for my first day at the front desk, I wondered which was better, to have had something for just a second and then have it taken away, or have had nothing ever at all. Mr. Yao came by with his son Jason later that day. We weren't expecting him, but since it was his motel, he could pop in any time he wanted. Jason and I sat in the front office while our parents talked in the living room. While he fiddled with the keys, I tried to make conversation. "So I checked a bunch of customers in yesterday," I said. He barely looked up. He wasn't much of a talker. "And it went super well," I said cheerfully. I left out the part about Mr. Stein and Mrs. Clifton. He didn't need to know about that. In the next room, our parents' voices grew louder. "That's not what we agreed to," I heard my mom say. "Says right here there is in the contract terms may change from time to time," Mr. Yao replied. Jason and I looked at each other, and we both ran into the living room. "But it's only been 2 days. You said we could have $5 a customer," my mom said. "Those were your words." I said $5 a customer, not including the first 10 and the weeklies. I jumped to my mother's defense. "You did not," I said. You said $5 a customer. You never said anything about first 10 or weeklies. No, I heard him say it. Jason insisted. I narrowed my eyes at him. You weren't even there. You went to your room. I cut back. Enough, Mr. Yao yelled. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. I looked over at my mom. I could tell she was calculating how much money we'd be losing under the new arrangement. A lot from the way she was chewing her cheek. I turned to Mr. Yao and tried again. Please, I said to him, we're working really hard. My parents didn't even finish cleaning until 8 last night, and the customers, they aren't so easy to deal with. We had to give 2 refunds this morning. Mr. Yao's eyes bulged. I felt myself shrinking from an alpha to an omega. You had to give 2 refunds? I bit my lip and nodded. You're paying for those refunds, he fumed. My dad opened his mouth to protest and closed it. Go ahead, Mr. Yao said. Just say the word. There are 10,000 other immigrants who would take your job in 2 seconds. The blood drained from my father's face. We want the job, he quickly reassured Mr. Yao. Please, sir, we still really want the job. The corners of Mr. Yao's mouth turned. On their way out, Jason leaned over. He had a smug look on his face. 2 refunds, huh? I thought you said it went super well yesterday. I felt my ears boil. And that's the end of chapter 6.